Well, hello there, terrible warriors. It's me, Justin. And it's wonderful that you've come back to me. And we have another Spotlight interview. And unlike in the past few Spotlight interviews where I have been talking to podcasters doing actual play content, I am instead today going to be talking to someone who is hoping to provide content and atmosphere for those actual play events and maybe for your next game. I am joined today by one Anthony Sabatino, film composer and conductor, who reached out to me to let me know about an app he's working on called Tabletop Tunes. Hello there, Anthony.
Hey, Justin. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks for contacting me. Tell me a little bit about. I've seen the press video you made on YouTube there for Tabletop Tunes, but let me know what is it? What are we talking about?
So Tabletop Tunes is basically, as far as I'm aware, the first ever interactive music app for tabletop gaming. It's just an app that plays music like a regular old music player, but the music is separated in genres, location bases, so you can be able to explore fantasy forests or go into dark dungeons, go to a nice peaceful town or a big kingdom, or if you're in a battle, you can fight orcs or goblins. We've created a whole bunch of music to be able to hit just a whole broad range of scenarios that you usually run into in various board games and RPGs and other games, and also just to be able to provide an ambiance for if you're just playing a more casual game or something that's not as hardcore as, say, the Dungeons and Dragons or the Arkham Horrors and any of that stuff. But if you're just playing Settlers of Catan or Carcassonne or something like that, you could have a nice little musical ambiance in the background to kind of just transport you into a new fantasy world, if you will.
Yeah, and this was interesting. I was watching, listening to this preview video you did that demonstrates how the app works. And I know that I've got a few albums that get sold every now and then of tabletop music that you can play that, if you still have a CD player lying around. And there are entire Reddit threads dedicated to people who curate playlists on Spotify. So you can download, and I've got lists of those for some of the games we've run both on the podcast and when I used to run games at the Stormcrow Manor. And I certainly know, being at conventions every now and then, a GM will show up with a speaker that they'll put up there on the table and they'll start pumping music through their phone. But it all has to be kind of done yourself. You've got to curate the songs. You've got to get it all layered. You've got to figure out how the transitions work. And you've got to have it all set in. And honestly, using the built-in media player on my iPhone or using Spotify, it can be a bit of a roadblock sometimes. And I really did like watching this demonstration, how not in the way it is. It's a lot of graphic icons, and then you pick your environment, and then you pick your track, and there's a couple of options, and then it just starts playing, it loops. And I really liked how it was the hardest thing when you're running as a GM, and the reason why I don't do a lot of music in my games when I'm doing it live, because I'm busy running my game.
Yeah, exactly.
And I can't be distracted to also be a DJ.
Yeah, and I mentioned this before we started the interview, but it's I'm the only one of my friends who really learned how to be a DM or a GM and be able to run campaigns and stuff. And so if I were doing that, then I'd be having to be the DJ and stuff as well. I remember what we used to do is we'd play, I'd have Game of Thrones soundtrack music going on, and it would be loop one, and after a while we just get kind of bored of it because usually those tracks are about a minute, 2 minutes long.
A couple weeks ago, I ran a game in the Sprawl, which is a cyberpunk setting, and I had a bunch of playlists that I had prepared in advance to run for the game that I was running through Spotify, and I'll admit about 20 minutes into the game, I just forgot about it. And the music was just playing, and I wasn't paying attention to it anymore because I was too focused on running my game. And I remember this isn't appropriate anymore, and having to scroll through the app to find another playlist to play.
Yeah, and that's what I ended up having to do is I had to make a mark as okay, which track would be good for this? And sometimes I'd just be clicking around trying to figure it out. And even just if we're playing other games like Settlers of Catan or King of Tokyo, we might just put on a random playlist. And the other thing you'll run into is just these tracks will be different levels, and so you'll be listening to like a nice quiet track, and then all of a sudden the next one just like boom, boom, da, 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 boom, kind of like explode in your face. And I mean, as a composer, I've got some heavy duty speakers, so if there's something loud comes in, it's just going to explode the room.
You can't just turn on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack unless you're also going to go through and start like categorizing each track by intensity and emotion and I know at the radio station I work at, which does a lot of classical music, we do have intensity ratings in our system rated from 1 to 10, so that when we're playlisting our hours, we don't have that happen. But that's not built in if you're just opening up the album and hitting shuffle. So tell me, another side though is I was really taken back by the high quality of the music. Honestly, you sent me the email. And I went, okay, we got a little like homebrew app happening here, and even like I think it was not Humble Bundle, but the Bundle of Holding, which does a lot of like pay what you want sales for tabletop games and books and stuff. They did a whole thing on soundtracks, and I remember listening and opening up and hearing like tabletop music tracks, and they're cheesy, they're really cringy.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of ran into as well as when I did a little bit of research on this, because I would look up stuff like Catan, Settlers of Catan playlists, and there would be some good stuff, but I ran into the same problem I mentioned before, is like it would have some classical music stuff, like some, I guess this is technically not, I mean, I don't want to get into the weeds of what is technically classical music, but there's like a Rafe Vaughan Williams track that's really beautiful, but it's super quiet, so I'm turning up the dial, and then next is something from like World of Warcraft, and then just exploding out of the speakers. We would sometimes, actually as a joke, just put on like old school RuneScape music, and which is like the old general MIDI spec, and you'd find some other stuff too, like people will make playlists of their own stuff, and I mean, it's good on them to be making stuff, but sometimes when you're working on these games, you want it to sound professional quality, and so
well, exactly.
That's what I was going for.
Because what these players are doing, what you are doing, what I'm doing, is when we're making our own playlists on something like a Spotify, we're pulling music from Howard Shore. Pulling music
you want
from,
you want the big,
we're having a Hans Zimmer
beautiful
bit.
lush, you want the big beautiful lush stuff to transport you into a new realm. You don't want to be taken out of it.
So tell me, what were some of your inspirations? Because I could probably guess a couple listening to where they were coming from, but what were some of the places that you were pulling from when you were coming up with forest and cave and town?
Yeah, well, forest, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that you can pull from. My big favorite, I guess, video game of the past few years has been The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. And so a lot of the music from that, my wife and I would play it quite a bit. Just hearing that music, it really just stuck with us. And actually, weirdly enough, my wife just got a new car, and somebody happened to have the Witcher 3 soundtrack in the car as a CD. It was totally random, too. So it was just like that's a good cool omen. Kind of... Yeah, exactly. A good omen. So we were really excited about that because we just love the music in that. And so I drew a lot of inspiration from that. Obviously, Lord of the Rings is a big one. And I mean, even like I mentioned before, like old school RuneScape stuff, kind of like it's cheesy, but you know, it's got what is it? Character. It's playful, cute. I don't know. I can't think of
whimsical.
The word I'm trying to say. Whimsical. Also, a lot of inspiration from some of the stuff from Joe Hisaishi, who did all the music for the Miyazaki films. Yeah. I think he's probably one of my favorite composers of that genre.
Whenever we watch Princess Mononoke, we burst into tears during that overture, just as he's heading over the hills for the first time and leaving the village on the elk, and we're just like, da 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 da. It just starts building up.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's something about like the way that he writes melodies and orchestrates it and everything that it's so heartwarming. It's just like if you don't feel anything when you're listening to any of those scores, then I mean, I don't know, you may need to go see a doctor or something, because those scores will hit you to your core.
And I heard little bits of certainly when I was hearing your demonstration, I was taken to like fairy fountain-ish music from Legend of Zelda, or a little bit of like Oblivion and Elder Scrolls with the kingdom sounds.
Yeah. I mean, I tried to make sure it was you had a wide range of variety within each genre, even within like Fantasy Forest. I didn't want it to all sound the same. I wanted within each track, not even just within like the sections, but like, I mean, one of the Fantasy Forest tracks, like Whimsical Wood, it's got like 3 or 4 different sections that are contrasting, and so it evolves and it moves around, and you get a kind of a variety within each track without it feeling jumbled and random. I wanted to give variety, but also make sure it's not like too in your face necessarily. I mean, although some of the tracks are meant in a way to be like, I guess, kind of quote unquote in your face, like the battle tracks. I mean, they're going to be intense, they're going to be high energy, but
yeah, they got to get the blood pumping. They got to
exactly.
You got to feel like there's something at stake. It sounds like a fun creative challenge also to make music that's designed to be ambient in the background and looping, because a lot of the same kind of strategies that would go into writing something else don't always apply, because this is going to potentially play forever.
Yeah, and so I mean, I guess a little background is I do music for both film and video games. And
yeah,
so
tell me about yourself. Where are you from?
Yeah, all right, yeah.
How did we get here?
We'll take a little sidebar.
In order to answer that question, we have to go back 13 years.
Yeah, well, this is me. You probably don't recognize me.
You might be wondering how I got here.
Yeah, exactly. I just butchered that line. Don't look at me. But yeah, I had kind of a weird musical journey. I started playing piano like I think I was like 4 or 5 years old, and started to really get into playing it when I got to start playing music from like Star Wars or Mario or Legend of Zelda. Those kind of things is when I really started to hit my stride and was like, ooh, yeah, I can get into doing this. And so I kept kind of playing and started to compose stuff in high school. And then I ended up kind of having a weird college journey where I'm from Kansas, actually, and I went to the University of Kansas to study film for a year, and I didn't really like the program very much, so I ended up changing to electrical engineering, actually, which is what my dad did, and I'd been working with him for a while. And so I thought, well, maybe I can do this and it'll help with my job with him. And it just killed my GPA, and I was miserable, and I didn't really know what to do. And then my parents, along with a family friend, was like, you should look into auditioning for Berklee College of Music, because I'd been taking some online classes from them, and it seemed like I really liked their program. They had a much more of a kind of like a modern music program going on, as opposed to a lot of I wasn't necessarily into much classical music at the time. I was kind of one of those like more punk rocker types, like, I don't need no stinking music theory to tell me how to write music and stuff. Of course, I've changed my tune on that quite a bit now, but at the time, it was kind of, I was like, oh, Berklee, it got a cool modern music feel. So I auditioned to get in, and I actually didn't get in the first time, but I realized, this is what I want to do. This is definitely the trajectory I need to be on. So I ended up moving back in with my parents for a year, took some classes at a community college in music production, which was actually super helpful and ended up helping me a ton in my future studies at Berklee and at later on, which I'll get to. But I went to, so I was doing the music production, and I was taking more piano lessons and voice lessons and theory lessons and doing all this stuff and really kind of sharpening the saw of my musicality, and then auditioned again, and then I got in, which was exciting. And so when I went to Berklee and I studied, I did a dual major in film scoring, and that was the first major. And then the second major was called electronic production and design, which is, that one's kind of like a music tech major, for lack of a better term. It used to be called music synthesis. And it's kind of interesting because it's almost like a choose your own major track when you get into it. It's like you take a lot of music, like a studio course and MIDI, like spec stuff. You take a programming course. There's a lot of stuff, but then you get 10 electives worth of, I guess, concentration electives for you to kind of choose your focus. And I had a bunch of friends. One friend who I actually met there is the programmer for the app. He took more of a programming route and audio programming and sound design stuff. And so that's why I ended up enlisting him for the app. His name's Jacob Johnson, and he's also a really cool killer musician as well. And then I had some other friends who did kind of more synthesis sound design stuff, and I kind of focused on mixing, mastering, and synth sound design too. When I was there, I went there for 3 years, and I just kind of crunched my schedule together and was doing extra credits during like the summer semester and stuff. And after that, I actually applied to go to USC for their screen scoring program, which is just basically film scoring again, but a little bit more intense. And I ended up getting into that program too, which was really exciting. So in 2017, I moved out to LA with my wife, and I went there to do their program for a year. That was really fun too. And the cool thing about that program is it's a very tightly knit program with the cinema school as well as the games department. And so I got to meet a ton of game designers and filmmakers and work on a ton of projects. I think I ended up working on over about like 40 plus projects over during my year at USC, which was super fun, and it was really great. And I still work with a lot of the same people I worked with there to this day. And actually, one of the game developers that I worked with did the art assets for the app as well. So it all kind of ties together.
So then, so you've met all these people. You've been collaborating with. You've got these contacts and this background and this obviously a love for film scores. And why then, as you zeroed in with Tabletop Tunes, how have we landed here onto this project?
We would be playing games a lot, and we'd be always searching for putting music on. One track we would always love putting on is just like the opening track from the Disney Robin Hood movies, like a kind of like a little silly whistling song. We just put that on repeat over and over, kind of as a joke. And eventually we would get sick of it. I mean, our friends would be sick of it after it played through once, but my wife and I got a good kick out of it. And we just loved having music on when we played games. It would just kind of give a much more interesting atmosphere. And as I would be playing, I was like, I wish there was like some sort of app where you could just be clicking on music and have genres and be able to go and know, or like be able to choose the ambiance you want. And it just kind of, it's always the same volume. You don't have to worry about the big jumps in volume that'll blow out your speakers. And then I just kind of sat there and was thinking on it for a few days. And I was like, why don't I just make that? And I could just try to find people, try to make it happen. So I reached out to my friend Jacob, whom I mentioned earlier. He had just moved out to LA, I saw. And actually, it was kind of serendipitous that I actually ran into him at a synth shop. I had another synthesizer that was getting repaired, and I stopped by the place that he worked at, and I saw him randomly, and I was like, oh my God, you're in LA. It's great to see you. And he had just moved there like a month ago. And so we were chatting, and then when I got this idea, I was like, maybe I should check with him to see if he might be interested in this project. And so we met up at like a little boba tea spot and pitched the idea to him, and we chatted about it, and he was on board. And so we had a few meetings, and then it wasn't until things like about the beginning of like January of 2020 that we started actually working on the app together.
All of life's best decisions have been made over boba tea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take me back now to Tabletop Tunes. One of the things, along with just like the music itself, which, as you mentioned, it's crafted to be behind the game, so it's not going to take over the table. It can loop for it just the music will keep playing, and there even as you're moving from village to kingdom, it's still it grooves together for the term. But tell me a bit about more of the expectation with the app, because the music fades in and out, and it's just it's I don't know, it seems something that you would take for granted once you were using it, but there's some very deliberate decisions you've made in the design. Yeah. So paint that picture, because again, I can't show the screen here in this audio format, but help paint the picture of what to expect when you open up this application. Sure.
Yeah, so when you open it up, it's got a little banner that says Tabletop Tunes, beautiful art assets done by my friend Christy Zhu, who is a game developer. And so you've got 4 menu options when you open it up, and I actually got it open up on my phone just to make sure that I get everything right. But there's 4 options. You've got Explore, Town, Battle, and Miscellaneous. And so we could start with Explore. And so when you click on Explore, you have 3 different options: Fantasy Forest, Cavernous Cave, and Dark Dungeon. And so the idea for this is just, kind of give you a rough idea of what these tracks are going to evoke. So like Fantasy Forest, it's going to be lush, mystical, whimsical. It's going to put you into you're going to be engulfed in beauty, hopefully, if I did my job right, when you enter that, and also kind of have a little bit of mystery, a little bit of kind of warmth and darkness, whereas Cavernous Cave is a little bit more contemplative and mysterious, in a darker form. It's a lot more of kind of wandering. It's not as directed as Fantasy Forest. Fantasy Forest tracks, they kind of give you a little bit more of a direction. You feel like you're going somewhere. You feel like you're exploring, whereas Cavernous Cave tracks, they kind of make you feel more like you're wandering. You don't actually have as much of a sense of direction. You're just checking in different little tunnel ways and seeing what's in here. So within each of these categories, you've got 3 different tracks. Fantasy Forest, you have 3 tracks. Cavernous Cave, you have 3 tracks. And Dark Dungeon, you actually have 2 tracks. And so for Fantasy Forest, the tracks that I've got in there are Mystical Mire, Whimsical Wood, and Luminous Lake. I tried to make as many of them, the track names, alliterations as I could. Fantasy Forest, we've got Whimsical Wood. It starts out with kind of some beautiful piano chords, and to kind of give you a sense of like wonder, maybe like fireflies floating around, little puddles here and there, and
safe but not too safe.
Yeah, exactly. It's easing you in, and then it has a little bit of rhythm that kicks in that makes you kind of feel like little whimsical fantasy butterflies or something like that are floating around. You follow them. It gives you kind of takes you on a little bit of a journey without, I guess, getting too epic, but also like not too scary. It just kind of keeps you on a path. It is kind of what the point of what I was trying to go for with a lot of these tracks is it sets you on a journey, but it doesn't lock you in necessarily. You have flexibility. And also with a lot of these tracks too is, I mean, if you find like a Fantasy Forest track that you want to use for like a dungeon or something like that, or whatever, you know, I mean, I'm not going to bar you from doing that. I tried to make these tracks flexible, but also specific. And so Dark Dungeon is probably the most ambient collection that we've got on here, and there's 2 tracks for that. And Catacombs and Cages and Tombs and Torture Chambers are the names of the tracks. And my main thought, really, when I was making these tracks, a lot of it, what I was thinking of is when we would play Betrayal at House on the Hill. It's just kind of dark ambience with maybe a little bit of kind of like creaks or echoes, something here and there.
Something
keep you kind
is
of on
stalking
edge.
You. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps you on edge, but it's also not like psycho strings or like really intense, like dun 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 dun. It's just kind of subdued. Yeah, a little bit of stuff will come in here and there, kind of like a little like a dun dun dun, kind of just really soft.
Yeah,
here
if we're
and
in
there.
the movie, this is where like every now and then the camera will look like it's looking through holes in the walls as your adventurers are walking around. Like something else is always spying on you, even if it's just the spider in the corner.
Exactly. And so that's basically the explore menu. So for town, that's the next category. We've got 3 more subcategories within there, and that would be village, tavern, and kingdom. So village basically was just meant to be kind of a homestead idea. You could kind of, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be like your home base. It could be various other places you might be visiting. I actually had some inspiration for a lot of these tracks from the game Divinity: Original Sin. You're visiting these towns. It's kind of like a central hub for you that's not necessarily like home. Town by the Sea is the first one in that category, and that's more uppity, kind of exciting. It's got a little thing of do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yeah, it got a bit of a shanty beat.
Yeah, exactly, and it's kind of a jig. It's got that triplets, so you kind of like think of like kids running around, running amok.
If it's anything like the Maritimes, everyone's just a little bit drunk all the time.
Yeah, it's like, oh, hey, what you got going on here? And it's kind of crazy stuff. Like, you know, it kind of evokes some characters. Yep. Fish for sale, people selling maps and other things. So that kind of idea. And then there's the other couple tracks in there, Goblin Village and Peaceful Village. So Goblin Village, more of like a kind of primitive drums kind of feeling, a little bit more quirky. And I guess for lack of a better term, like an industrial in a way. And then the last one there is Peaceful Village, and that's just kind of like acoustic guitar, a little bit of violin. My wife, every time there's one part in the middle where violin comes in, and my wife always says it's like, oh, it sounds like the old family farm, and that's kind of what I was going for.
Yeah, very Animal Crossing.
Yeah, Animal Crossing, kind of Fox and the Hound.
Yeah.
Classic feeling. And so that's Village, and then the other 2 categories we've got are Tavern and Kingdom. I'm actually going to skip the Tavern and go to Kingdom because the reason why I put in Kingdom as opposed to Village is Village you can have a very specific kind of intimate feeling, whereas Kingdom, I wanted to give you kind of that high fantasy Lord of the Ringsian feel.
More
like you
urban.
just stepped into Minas Tirith or something. It feels, urban is a great way to describe
There's
it.
There's an anonymity in the Kingdom that you don't get in the village. Everyone knows everyone when you walk into the village, but you're a stranger when you walk into the Kingdom.
Yeah, and so there's much more of a grandiose feel to that. So the first track in there, Grand Castle, that's much more of like a kind of a large, darker kind of lots of horns and high fantasy. It feels very rich, is the best way I could think to describe it. It's got a really rich and solid sound, lots of strings, lots of horns in there. I had a friend play live trumpet on that.
It's funny, as an adventurer, you'd feel like a big fish in a small pond in the village, and all of a sudden you feel like the small fish in a big ocean.
Yeah, exactly.
While this is playing.
Yeah, and then the other two ones in there, Towers and Trebuchets. For Towers and Trebuchets, I wanted to make it more of kind of like a ba-ba-ba-ba-dum. Give you kind of a more of like the king is coming kind of thing, or you're touring the castle. Yeah, exactly. And so you kind of, it's a little bit more energy kind of going on. And then finally within that category is war-torn territories. And my thought was just like, what if you come to like a kingdom that's just like been ravaged, It's like to bring back the Witcher 3
you were talking about.
Exactly,
right after the big invasion and everything's desolate and destroyed.
Yeah, the kind of like Velen feel where it's just like dead bodies, rotting carcasses, it makes you feel a little bit bummed out.
And you still gotta live here.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's go back to Tavern. So Tavern, I mean, obviously kingdoms can have taverns, villages can have taverns. There could just be a tavern in the middle of the forest for all you know.
Yeah, just the inn at the crossroads.
Yeah, exactly. And so these tracks are a little bit more kind of stripped down. They're not as epic, obviously. I tried to use smaller ensembles, kind of like improvised percussion sounds, like maybe like taps on, like I've got a little sample instrument library that's a lot of Renaissance drums. So
this is the first one we've come across where this could actually be what's playing in the world. Rather than just playing as like a film score where your characters don't hear this music.
Yeah,
here in
exactly.
the tavern, they actually could be hearing this music.
Precisely, and that's especially what I was thinking with Tavern After Dark. That one is the most kind of just like it's very subdued. It's actually very similar to one of the Fantasy Forest tracks I used, just because I wanted to use that theme, it's like the main theme I wrote for the app, basically, and to reuse kind of that theme, but in a different context. And so it's just like a recorder sound and like a Celtic harp feeling. And so it's very stripped down, makes you feel like, it's the end of the night, and it's just like you and a few other people. Yeah, exactly. And so there's that. And then like there's other ones like Tavern Brawl in there. That's one where you kind of like you're hitting the whether or not it's like, it could act
bump into the wrong person. You spilled my drink.
But it could also be it could also be like underscore or source music where it's actually in the world, because it could be it's played as if it's the instruments in the tavern, but it also, it could be very much like high energy, like you're bumping into somebody or something's going on, or it's just like there's a big party going on. The names are just to kind of just
could work in the market as well.
Yeah, it's the names are just kind of softballs. You could choose to do what you will with them. And so then the next section is the battle section, and this is probably my favorite aspect of the app that we've got. We've got 4 different battle tracks currently. It's Battle Mild, which is like Goblin Battle, Battle Tense, which is more of an Orc battle, Battle Epic, which is like Death Knight, and then Battle Boss, which is a Dragon.
Yeah. How big is your fight? One thing I did like, I know I'm skipping a bit to the end here, it is when you hit the battle music and you start it, it interrupts whatever music you've got currently playing. But when that battle's over, so let's say we're doing Tavern Brawl and we go into a fight. When that's over, it'll go right back to the music you had playing before, right?
Yes, and that was actually a bit of a a troubling thing for Jacob to be able to program. It was just kind of tricky and weird, but he was able to finally get it to work properly, which is great, and I'm kudos to Jacob for being able to figure all this stuff out. Because, I wanted it to be... We had this
like
problem
Final
where it's
Fantasy, where you go into the battle, and then when it's done, you have to go back to the overworld.
Yeah, exactly. And our thinking was it's just like you fight in the tavern, and it's like once you're done with the fight, it's like you're back in the tavern. It's not like it's just like everything just kind of stopped forever. And it was mostly just happened because when I'd be playing it, I'd end the battle, and then I'd forget to press anything afterwards. I was like, we should probably make sure that something
in the
starts
void
playing again. Yeah.
Because there's that awkward, you're standing over the dead bodies going, whoa, what now?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, well, okay, we killed them. I guess they learned their lesson. Can I get a drink now? For the battle tracks, what you do is when you, like you were mentioning before, you select it and then you press the fight button to begin, and we have a little stinger that comes in that will lead you into the music, just so it's not just like the music stops.
Yeah, it's that like Pokemon battle
exactly,
moment that plays to signify it's battle time. Get your swords out, roll for initiative.
Yeah, exactly. And so then it goes, and the thing that I'm most excited about is we implemented an intensity slider, where basically what you can do is you slide the little slider, it's a little skull, and the further you slide it up, the more layers come into the music and make it more and more intense. So like hypothetically...
I was so excited when I saw that, because when I was watching your presentation and you were playing through like the village and the forest, I was talking to my partner going like, this is really nice, but one of the things I love having as producing actual play podcasts is that granular control over the music. And the music we use on the podcast when we were doing actual plays, especially in our Spire campaign, was I would be able to get the stems of those songs, and I could just play like the underscore before I would start playing the melody of the music, and I can play with how much I'm using, how much loudness or how dynamic it is during the fight, because there's that standoff sometimes where no one's attacked yet, and then as things are getting more desperate, the music, and then but these battles go in ebbs and flows. You got to pull off and do a little bit of healing and come back in, and I was going like, I really wish there was something like this and then you predicted and then you get to the battle music like, he did, it's in there, it's in the battle music, that's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could have a situation where it's like it just starts off as like, you're fighting 3 goblins, and then one of them blows a horn, and then 20 more show up, and so that's obviously gonna cause. I mean, if you're just listening to the same kind of intensity, it doesn't really give you the same effect when you're a player. And
it looks just like a volume control, which just has a skull on it. And so for me, where I would be layering multiple tracks and going up and down with the faders, like I've got a big mixer, I was actually really turned on by how easy that was, just one slider up and down. Again, like it's not in your face. Even as a GM, the idea of having to do dynamic music for the battle while I'm also having to do the math of the battle. That's the most complicated part of your game, especially if you're doing Dungeons and Dragons. To just be able to just have one little slider, not think about it, that's a blessing. Yeah, no, and I mean that's how a lot of video game scores usually work. And there are some video game I was thinking of Nier Automata or Final Fantasy VII Remake, how they have these, it's the same music track, but as you're playing through, it goes through different styles of that same song, and it fades it in and out. Yeah, and there's, some people will go the extra mile of having all the stems in there and being able to like kind of crossfade different stems in it. But generally, what I've mostly just done is you'll have just multiple intensity layers. Well, you got to keep it simple. Crossfade. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes it's one, it's easier for me, but it's also easier for the programmer typically as well for whatever game we may be working on. And for the user, honestly, on the other end, if I had 4 or 5 faders to be able to choose which I'm going up, I'm not going to do that. Like, it's one thing for me to edit that into my podcast because it's done after the game has been played. It's another thing to have to do it live while I'm running the game. And the other thing as well is, when you're stripping out stems, you are adding in a whole new level of possibility to mess something up, or like it'll become imbalanced, or it might just sound
stripped down, and so that's what I was kind of trying to take the guesswork out of it, being able to just like, you want it to be more intense, slide that bad boy up. You want it to be less, just slide it back down, and you basically got it. And then the final thing that we also incorporate in there is you have the possibility for a victory and a defeat stinger. So there's little buttons that say victory, and it's got a cute little trumpet, or defeat, and it's got a gravestone. And so depending on how the battle outcome goes, you can click on them and it'll play a stinger, appropriately matching the style of like victory, like you want it. It's a little bit more elaborate than that, but
it's a whole dun 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 dun. Yeah, the fanfare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So and then defeat, kind of a little bit more, obviously darker, kind of feel bad. I was kind of wondering, is like, how often would you have a defeat in any sort of, like, if you have an RPG or something? We ran a game. You get defeat. It's you're done usually.
Our last session 0 that I recorded was for a game called Merkborg. And it is a game where you play characters that are kind of made out of glass, and your characters are going to die a lot, and character creation is very quick. And so it depends. If you're playing Dungeon Crawl Classics, or like a much more older form of Dungeons and Dragons, or other games that use OSR, where it's more about the gauntlet, and you're going to lose more than one character in a night, you might deal with multiple defeats, and then you pull another character from the stack, and you keep playing through the same dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. And there's also, I mean, lots of scenarios where there is like, you are meant to lose the fight anyways, as part of the storyline. So that's why I wanted to make sure that we kept it in there. I was just kind of concerned. I was like, I really hope that people actually use it, and it's not just like
are you able
gathering dust.
Are you able to just go back and click on another section to just exit out of the battle music without having to have one of those? Because sometimes you just run away. And,
yeah, exactly.
And there's no definitive end. It just, you go back into the cave and you leave. Maybe we'll come back to this later when we got the right weapons.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that was actually like a bug that we were kind of trying to work out for a while, because it didn't even really occur to us. Is like, we just like, okay, yeah, you press start on the battle, and then you've got the stingers and you're set. And then I would try to select a different track after I was done, and I was like, Jacob, we've got a problem. I can't change tracks. Unless it's like you're locked in until you do victory or defeat.
What if you just added a white flag third button, and that just exit out?
You could do that.
It just doesn't have the stinger, you know?
Yeah, you just don't have the stinger. I mean, we're kind of still working on getting like a play.
I don't want to
pause
be that one
too.
who's like immediately throwing feature requests in the middle of this interview for your unreleased app.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, it's greatly appreciated, because we're always open for more ideas, and we've got ideas in the docket. We just kind of need to get the app out first and then see what people think. But yeah, I mean, that's definitely an idea too, of like, just like run away, and then it just goes strght back to the previous track. And actually, that would probably be easy to implement. I'm going to write that down right now.
And then he just doesn't play a stinger. It just aborts.
Yeah.
From the it's just an abort button, an eject button.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for your contribution to the app so far.
There you are.
We also worked on to make sure it's like, hypothetically, if you were in a mild battle and then all of a sudden a boss comes in, you can just start the boss battle and it'll crossfade into that as well.
Cool. Yeah, because that's sometimes, I've run games where, you might be running out of time. You're like, well, I had this boss battle planned for the end of the session, but they spent so much time dicking around in town that my boss is coming right now and coming through the ceiling. And so going from that mild battle music to boss battle music right now, that can be fun too. So I'm glad you were able to do that.
Yeah, and the boss battle is the only battle track that actually doesn't have an intensity slider. The thought being,
this thing only goes to 11.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you've got a dragon. I mean, you can't really. The dragon's not gonna. We're not playing it off of. It's like, this isn't even my final form. It's like, no, the dragon's the final form in my situation. Although, I mean, we'll probably have more boss battle tracks in the future. So I can feasibly see a world where we have different like boss battle phases or something like that, or work in some sort of things like that. That's generally the battle music category, and the final category is miscellaneous. And so that's just, it's got two categories, miscellaneous and stingers. And I'll skip the stingers first, is because I was thinking it might be fun just in case someone wanted to hypothetically play a stinger from one of the battle tracks. Because the battle tracks are the only ones that have stingers. They have an intro stinger, and then they have
let's say you win the arm wrestle in the tavern. You just want to play funny, the victory music.
Yeah, or if you just want like a dramatic sting of like a kind of just like a little drum roll or something. You could just fire it off if you
roll
want.
a charisma check and you fail, and you play the defeat music like the Price is Right lose horn.
I was actually thinking about putting in some kind of goofy, random sound effects and stuff in there too, but I was thinking, I don't know, I don't want it to start like take away from the other aspects of it. But that's definitely something we're considering, is having like a goofy reference section as well.
Maybe Ocarina of Time, right, where you open up the chest and and you're like, what is it gonna be now? It's gonna be a potion.
It's the worst when it's like 5 rupees.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's more like, it works well in a video game. It doesn't happen a lot in tabletop. Usually it's just like, all right, here's all the treasure you got. Write this down.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, miscellaneous section is the actual miscellaneous category. And that's just got the opening theme of the game called The Adventure Begins. It starts playing when you open the app. So in case you wanted to just listen to that or have that on, that's an option. And then a couple other tracks that I made that didn't quite fit into any of the other categories. One of them's called Space Hub. It's kind of more of a sci-fi, whimsical kind of track. It's got a little bit of a beat to it too. So obviously it's not like very fantasy.
Hey, again, going back to Crits and Giggles, the music I used for the Stolid Rock, which was this big floating magical city that they went to, was Moonbase Alpha, was the name of it, right? Because it was, once you start getting into like magic becomes like science is magic we don't understand, or right, or magic is science we don't understand. And it's just like, once you get up to that level, science and magic become indistinguishable, and like what is that? And so when you get into like those really magical elven cities, or you start going to other planes of reality, sometimes the sci-fi tunes are the ones you end up going to. You start playing stuff that has more of a tech synth beat to it, because this is alien.
Yeah, and it's also kind of one of those things that just kind of basically signals like we are going to do other genres outside of fantasy in the future.
That was my next question. Is there a plan? Because like Dungeons and Dragons is fun, but it's not the only one. Like, even going back to traditional RPGs, you're still dealing with World of Darkness and Werewolf and Vampire and all that gothic horror. You're still dealing with Shadowrun and all that much more of a cyberpunk feel. Cyberpunk came out in 1984. Paranoia came out in 1984. So not even dealing with modern tabletop games, but there's this whole discourse happening right now on Twitter on like, D&D is not the default. The D in Dungeons and Dragons does not stand for default. And there's a lot of other genres and settings and superheroes and mysteries. Like Call of Cthulhu is as much like a noir mystery as it is a horror, and like that gumshoe kind of feel to it. So there is a plan like down the road on the roadmap to play with other genres.
Yeah, well, I mean, as it stands right now, I'm hoping to probably have a content pack ready by Halloween, October-ish of this year, probably before that. And I'm not super sure where exactly we're going to go. I definitely want to go with, like, do some sci-fi stuff, do some kind of mystery horror things as well. I mean, I mentioned Betrayal at House on the Hill earlier, to maybe like a haunted mansion section or something, and have some different options for that.
Which is great, because even in Dungeons & Dragons, like, Curse of Strahd, right? So
I mean, there's so many options, and part of me was just wanting to like see what people who get the app maybe request for like more ideas, because it's, I mean,
are you afraid of that? Because tabletop can be emergent in ways that you're not ready for. Like, is there a bit of like an excitement mixed with apprehension of like all the weird ways they're going to end up using your music?
I came up with the idea of this app, and then my friends and I all put it together and made it. And my hope for it was to just be able to provide something for people to, I guess to like be able to give them excitement when they play games. I mean, one of my favorite things in the world is when I'm watching a movie or playing a game and the music gives that goosebump-inducing moment, that excitement where you're like, whoa, this is epic, this is awesome, this is moving. And that's kind of what I was... And I mean, that's what I aspire to whenever I'm writing music for a project anyways. And especially for this is like, I just want to be able to like move people and immerse them into the games and stuff. And so I think it'll definitely be well received. And the truth is not everyone's gonna love what you do, no matter what kind of artist or creator you are. That's just how it is. So some people may think, oh, it's too repetitive or it's not catchy enough. It is what it is. I'm totally ready to accept that. But I think what we put together is really good, really solid, and it's nice and fun.
I gotta
And
say, I have to agree with, like, there's lots of options if you want to curate your own playlists, but to be able to have not just the music but also the tool to be able to run it through a simple interface where it just will run on your, I guess, your tablet or your phone, and just have that to the side where you can just play it and then more or less not have to worry about it as
Yeah.
as the DM, because that's the curse you were talking about. If you buy the game, if you want to find anyone to play it with, you're going to have to run it,
Yeah.
and you're already having to keep track of all the math and all the character sheets and the story plots and all the characters in your head and all the puzzles you've got ready, any maps you've drawn, and then to also throw music into the mix.
Yeah.
I was really excited to see just the demonstration that you shared with me, how easy it looked. And that's if there's any barrier of difficulty or work that I have to do, I'll just run it through Spotify. And so that's got me really, really excited. Where can we, you've sat through an hour of us chatting about it. Where can we follow up with you, Anthony, to stay on touch or stay updated with where this goes? Because if I want to get ready, I want to be there day one, early adopter. Where should I follow up on to stay in touch with you?
Well, tabletoptunes.com is our website. I recently made it go live, although some of the links aren't working.
That was still available?
Yep, it was, shockingly.
That's incredible.
I also bought, we were trying to figure out whether or not we were going to call it Tabletop Tunes or Tabletop Tracks, and we opted for Tunes just because it's a more universally known term for music, whereas tracks is kind of more of a technical term, and people might think for some reason like train tracks or something. And so
it sounds like more work in my head.
Yeah.
It sounds like I'm gonna have to do the work. Like you're gonna give me the materials, but it sounds more DIY when you use the word track.
And Tabletop Tunes, it's a little bit friendlier, I thought, too.
Looney Tunes, right? It's got that kind of feel to it,
yeah, well, TUNES, but Another thing I wanted to mention about this is, like, I want this to kind of be a communal thing of, like, being able to, like, people can choose tracks and be like, oh, hey, this track works really well for this kind of scenario or this kind of campaign. One thing I want to do in the future is to be able to do, we're going to, I guess, for lack of a better term, like a playlist function. But what I think of it more as like a campaign or a scene function, where if you've got like a 4-hour session you're going to do and they're going to go through the dungeon.
You can storyboard your music in advance.
Yeah, that's one of the planned features that we have in the future, is to be able to basically storyboard. I'm not sure if we're going to call it scenes or what have you, but I want it to be able to be put together, and potentially you can share it online and post it and then people can like rate it, download like the scene, or even comment potentially, and so to make it kind of like a communal thing, because I mean tabletop gaming is pretty communal as is. I mean, just automatically, I mean, you're playing with other people, but I mean there's such a great community online of people just like asking for recommendations, for, I mean, I'm constantly on there for like rule clarifications, looking at forums and stuff. And so I think that being able to get people interacting in a way within the app of like saying, it's like, oh, here's like my scene for this specific campaign or game or whatever, or like this works really well for this game with this expansion. That's really what I'm kind of hoping for, and then maybe that could hopefully snowball into more concepts and ideas from people, for other ideas of where the app can go, what kind of content we could expand out to.
Yeah, great. So all the links will be available in the show notes as well, so you can follow up with that. And Anthony, I hope that we'll be able to follow up later as this project develops and check back in with you again to see how it's going, because I'm excited to see where it is. And I certainly can see, like, back when I was running games at the restaurant, and I hope one day we'll be able to do that again. This would have been a really fun tool to have. And same thing for I'm not there yet, but Terrible Warriors, I'm hoping to do some live streams, and I can't, with what I've got right now, play music. Is there also with Tabletop Tunes? I think you mentioned it off the beginning. It's your intention that this will be something that streamers and podcasters and actual play shows, they would be able to use this in their games as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, so the way that it's set up is that I own all the copyright to the music and stuff, and it's all going to be licensable. So if you wanted to like license it for a project or something, or play it through on a stream or what have you, then that's totally allowed. It's fine by me. It gets the app and my music out there. And one thing I did want to touch on is that the app itself is free, but the way that we're kind of monetizing it, we're not putting any ads or banners in there because I find those super annoying as a user of apps. So it's just going to be kind of a freemium structure. When you buy or when you download the app, you have access to a few tracks automatically, and then you can buy basically music packs. You can buy the Explore pack, the Town pack, and the Battle pack, or you can buy all of them for a discounted price, basically. So just the same thing as buying a music album. But,
a la carte. You can go through and choose what you need to have in your game.
Yeah, but we didn't want like the intrusive ads. We're not tracking you or anything. I don't even know what I would do with the data if I was. But we just wanted to make it at least give you something to get for free. But then if you want to really kind of expand it out and get more options, then you just pay once, you buy the music, and then you got it for life.
Excellent. Well, I like that. I like that a lot. Anthony, thank you so much for the time you spent with us. Is there a place that we can follow you if we want to stay in touch with what you're up to? Because I know you've got other projects that aren't just tabletop tune related, but you do other music tracks. You've got other projects that you're doing, and if we want to stay in touch with you, is there a place we could do that?
Yeah, I mean, so I produce music under the name Moose with a Scarf. That's pretty much all electronic music, and I've got a Facebook page there, facebook.com/moosescarf. Also on instagram.com/moosescarf. Facebook and Instagram are the ones I check the most. I'm also on Twitter, but I rarely use it at all. So those are the two places. Also, AnthonySabatinomusic.com and moosescarf.com are two places you can go. And then obviously tabletoptunes.com. I'm monitoring all of those emails constantly. So if you've got any feature requests after using it or anything like that, definitely, I guess you could reach out to any of those, although it'd probably be easiest if you reached out to the Tabletop Tunes email on there. And yeah, that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you, Anthony, for hanging out with us, and thank you for sharing us Tabletop Tunes. I wish you all the luck in the future with this project. And for you, my dear listener, check out the show notes where you can find out more about this project, and let me know what you think. And we'll be back next week. I don't know with what, but make sure you follow us on Twitter at Dice Warriors, where I will keep you in the loop with everything that we're doing and talking about. And until that time, thank you for spending your time with me and for learning a little bit more about some of the tools that are being developed to help make our games a little bit more interesting and immersive. And until that time, when we're all together again, be good to each other. Bye.